Hi, everyone. We have so
Hey,
many people
everyone.
joining. It's nice to be here.
It's honestly nice to have Ozra here with us. It's nice to have you all with us. Thank you.
And we have my husband with us too, who's on a work call in the other side of the room. So sorry about that.
So would everyone welcome Brent as well? We're just really thankful for his voice being a part of this stream with us today.
Yep. We're really hoping he's done soon. I don't know if anybody else is having some working from the same space issues as we are, but that's the life we're living.
Everyone, we're going to wait just a few minutes for everyone to show up, and then we'll do introductions and get started. The stream should be about an hour. Would love to see where y'all are from. I'm Rogie, and I'm from, or I'm located in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Nice. And as you all are writing your answers in the chat, make sure to toggle on all panelists and attendees. It's that blue bar. Right now, Rogie and I are seeing where everyone's from, and that's really exciting. But it's nice to see everyone else's answers. Got a lot of people from all over the place. That's really awesome.
Yeah, I always love where everyone is from, all these Figma designers. We got, how do I say, is it Tanzania or Tanzania? I'm pretty sure it's Tanzania. Ozra, we got somebody from Bosnia.
You know, every time somebody from Bosnia comes around, I just get super excited. Bruce Muir and I have met each other multiple times, though. I bother him every time he's on the stream.
Well, let's go ahead and get started with introductions.
We have a lot of people from Europe joining us, so I know it's very late where you all are. Jakarta, that's awesome.
We've got Nigeria, we've got Brazil. The metropolis of Pittsburgh, great. Daniel, nice work. Midnight in Eastern Europe. Thanks for coming in.
Cool. Should we kick it off?
Yeah, let's go. I'll kick it off. I guess in a true random fashion, I'll just kick it off with telling you who I am, what I do, and one random detail about myself, and Ozra has to do the same as a result. I'm Rogie King. I'm a designer, been a product designer for a very long time. I'm now a designer advocate at FIGMA, and I love my job. I love showing you all cool things about FIGMA. And one random detail is that long, long ago, I used to be a taxidermist, and I used to think I wanted to be a taxidermist for my living, and wow, so glad I didn't do that.
I did not know that about you. So many opportunities you had to give me that fun fact and you haven't.
I just felt like it would be a great time to do on the stream, and now it's your turn. Something equally as deep.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see. And I just noticed that our names are off center here. So who made this slide? It was not me.
Hey, listen,
hi everyone, my name's Ozra. I'm not a designer. I'm not a designer. I work on the community team. If anybody went to config, I organize that. Yeah, really excited to meet all of you and to moderate the Q&A and help Rogie today.
Way to get your detail. Nice try.
Cool. So just a few housekeeping things for today. I just want to go over really quickly. We went over the chat. Feel free to use the chat throughout the session to chat with one another. If you want to ask us questions, there's a Q&A button. I'll be monitoring that. I'll interrupt Rogie. If any of you are asking a question and you want me to actually unmute you and you can ask Rogie yourself, let me know. I'm happy to do that. The session is recorded. We're putting it on our YouTube. It usually takes us a handful of days, but it will be on there. And just a friendly reminder, we have a code of conduct. Please be kind to another. Yeah, so we're excited. I'll let Rogie kick it off, but I will be in the background taking all of your answers and questions, and I'll shoot them to him.
Thanks, Azra. It's going to help me to just, stay focused on this screen, designing as fast and feverishly as I can. So we're going to go hop into Build It in Figma. Today, we're actually going to be working on responsive web. So let's just jump in and do this. I haven't actually prepped a lot, and that's kind of the way that I do things on the Build It in Figma stream. Basically, what I want to do is just showcase kind of the whole process of like how I do things from beginning to end. And I think it's really important that I do it and show you how I build it from the beginning to the end rather than prepping everything. So see, these things that I prepped, we're actually just going to delete them off the screen because I want to show you everything. So I came up with a fictitious idea for building a website. And so in case any of you are unfamiliar with what responsive design is, it's this idea of creating a design that can respond to different screen sizes. As soon as, this was years ago, as soon as, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, I'm probably wrong on that, but browsers started getting this capability called media queries. And in media queries, it's able to see the size of the screen, and it can actually adapt the design via CSS to those things. So that's the same way that you're able to go to like Nintendo.com, and it's the same Nintendo.com, whether or not you're on your mobile device, or you're on an iPad, or you're on a desktop screen. And years before that, if you remember, if you're as old as I am, they used to have different websites for this, and you would go to something like m.twitter.com. So it's like a mobile.twitter.com. And so now it's super important that we design these sites with all the screen sizes in mind and knowing that your design can adapt to those screen sizes. So I created a fictitious little thing. I was thinking like, what if I love the Nintendo Switch, and I was thinking, what if we created something that was like a Switch fan site, but it was like Twitch? And so I named it Switchy. If you have a better name for it, please, my God, please tell me, because this is a horrible name. But this is like a streaming site. So what we're gonna do is take some cues from this navigation here that's on twitch.com and just kind of follow these different categories and then design out these categories here, as well as design out a search bar, and then design out maybe some icons, maybe a signed out and a signed in state. The other thing we want to keep in mind, I haven't done this before, so I'm just designing this from scratch. We want to keep in mind that these things are going to have to work in some way on different devices. So in case you're not familiar with the frame tool, if you click the frame tool and you don't just draw something on the screen, you click the frame tool, you'll be given some of these cool little presets. So you can just simply hit that and boom, you've got a desktop mock there. So off we go, we're gonna start. I'm gonna get some water and get at it. I love that y'all love Switchy. That's great to hear. Prepping for this stream, I was like, I love character design. So I wanted to design this little fella, designed him in Figma, of course. All right, so let's just start with the bare bones here. Let's just scrap all of this stuff. I'm gonna keep this here for this color, but we've got this little logo here. And I'm gonna go ahead and just take that desktop frame. We're gonna start at the desktop level. And I'm just gonna assume right now my navigation, because that's all we're gonna do today is the navigation. I'm gonna assume that it's 1440 right now. I'm gonna go ahead and just type in here 80, and we're gonna go with an 80 pixel nav height. A lot of times desktop nav heights are a little bit higher. So we're gonna go with that. And we're gonna go ahead and try to bring this logo in here. And we wanna create that logo anchored on the left. So let's just do some frame basics here. I'm gonna bring in this shape here. It's just a rectangle. And then I'm gonna bring in this text here. And I'm gonna go ahead and just create this to be auto layout, because if all of a sudden we realize that switchy is, we have a cooler name for this. I want this to be able to respond. So I'm going to select these two objects at once, holding shift. I'm going to go ahead and hit shift A to auto lay out that thing. And you'll notice that it automatically adjusts to the padding here. Here's our padding. That's a horrible padding. Whoever works with 37. So we're going to start with maybe like 32, anything like 8 based, so that we can divide it in half and half, and it's not going to be on half pixel. And then, well, we don't want this to be 29. We want it to be maybe a better number for that. So we can look at this here and we can say that's 22 height, and we can adjust it as a result, or we can just leave it and just see what happens. So we'll do that. I'm going to bring in this logo here. Now, one thing that you may notice about scaling vector objects here is that it's really frustrating in Figma, because look at this, like it's not retaining the appearance that I wanted. So there's a couple ways to work around this. One is that I could go into all these vector objects here, and I could just outline all of these things. So I can go right click here and go to outline stroke, and that should break that down into non-stroke based objects, all into just fills. And I can showcase how that might work. If I now scale this, look, it works perfectly. The other way to work around that would be to potentially, and I'll back up here just a second, undo those things. What I could do is take this instance of this component, hit K to go into the scale mode. Ozra, actually, I taught her this trick. She's an expert designer now. And if you go into scale mode, you'll see that there's these double arrows. And now I can scale this thing down. So maybe I'll go with that to kind of retain those objects, because maybe I want to beef up this stroke for the smile, whatever. But we're going to go ahead and move this in. And I'm just going to drag it right into this auto layout frame to make sure we got that. Okay. I'm actually just going to select the frame and copy it in. And then if I use my arrow keys, I can actually move it around. But I've noticed that all of a sudden it's gotten way too tall. So what I can do here is I can actually mess with that vertical padding so that it becomes the right height there, or I can mess around with some other settings. But for now, I think that this works. I can also adjust the spacing in between these two if I like, and I can put in maybe 12. Maybe I like the way that looks. And then maybe over here, I'm going to go ahead and bring this in a little bit. Maybe that'll be 16 or 24. I'm not sure right now exactly how I'm going to do this, but we'll go ahead and take it. That looks pretty good. All right. So we're going to go ahead and take this now. We're going to take this navigation thing. We'll go ahead and double click on the label. So you can either double click on the label, or you can just click here and double click into this. And I can just type in like main nav or navigation, whatever I want to. Right? And then we're going to go ahead and create this into a component. And the reason that I want to create it into a component is, one, I want when I change anything in this component, let's say it's the background to this red, I want it to reflect in all of my other instances, because I'm going to be using this across a lot of screens. The other reason that I want to create it in components, or create components out of it, is because I want to actually see what the responsive or how this will respond to my adjustments. Now I'm still in scale mode. You can see by my cursor that's got these double arrows. So if I hit V, I can simply move back to the move mode, and now it won't scale this whole thing. All right, so we'll test out how our responsive adjustments work as we start adding things to this nav. The first thing I'd like to do as well is I'd like to go ahead and anchor this thing to the left and to the top. And that way, if I move this nav, let's say if I wanted this thing on the right, say we had a right-hand logo, and I set it to the right, if I ever move this in, it would just stay anchored over there. Now we want the logo on the left, but I want to just give an example of how we can do that. All right, so the next thing we got to be thinking is like, okay, what else do we need here? Like we need some kind of nav items. Maybe those will be a little button. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a little frame about the size that I'd like for that button. Now remember, I don't really know. I don't have a grid right now. I can turn on a grid if I'd like, but I'm kind of just designing in the blind right now, designing in the dark. And so if I turn on a layout grid, I can get a little bit more of an idea of how these things are laying out. And now I can actually draw on that grid. Let me just make sure that my snap to grid is on, layout grids. Okay, snap to pixel grid. I'm good there. All right. I've now drawn frames within frames within frames, which shows you that I'm absolutely a professional designer over here. All right, so maybe I want it to be about this. This is like the hit area of that button. And within that frame, I'm gonna go ahead and add some text. For now, we're just going to put in nav item. Now, since I'm in this frame over here, I can actually just use my alignment tools and it'll align perfectly in the center. I'm going to take these two items and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use Shift A to convert this into an auto layout frame. Just kind of see how that might look. All right, that looks pretty cool. Maybe that text is a little bold, maybe a little big, but I like this. I like the way that it looks on the nav. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it out here because I want to make a component of this item. So I'll just hit the component here and I'm going to name this as well here. Maybe I'll name it with like a nav item, something like that. So everything within this slash naming, this will be the main nav, this will be the main nav item, and it'll all be categorized within this nav structure by using that slash naming. We're not going to be talking a lot about naming components. There's a whole bunch of great tips on that. But for now, I really just want to like get into flow and just start building these things as I would do. So this thing at Roboto Black is feeling a little big and a little bold. So we'll drop it down to maybe bold. And 22, I'd like the logo to be bigger, but man, this one's big. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to 16 for now, which I understand to be like kind of like your base usable, readable style. A lot of website designs start with like a base 16. It's kind of the default font size if you're making a website. Okay, now that I have this component here, I'm gonna get really messy and I'm just gonna start componenting-itis everywhere. But I'm gonna just drag this component in here and I'm just gonna drag a few of them out. Now, the one thing, and this is kind of the old way that I used to design is I would just type in like, okay, I know that I need a following, so let's go ahead and do that, following. And then I would be like, oh, sure, let's do browse. But then these aren't necessarily like in the right place. So then I would like slide them around. Okay, this is really the real reason that you'd want to use auto layout. But in the old way that I would do things is I would come up here, I'd be like, all right, distribute the horizontal space. All right, that's okay. Maybe I would end up using Figma's tidy feature to come in here. When I select multiple objects, I can actually adjust the spacing. But the problem with this method is that I'm going to be constantly adjusting this. And as I'm adding nav items, oh, it's just going to be a cluster. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to Shift A to auto lay these things out. Now, if I actually type in here, you'll notice that everything shifts because Figma detected that it's a horizontal auto layout. This is perfect. Figma also detected the spacing between the objects, and I can see that over here. And so I can actually just put them at 0 if I want to. For now, I want them at 0. I think that's probably going to be best. And notice that my button size is not exactly the same height that it used to be. That's because up here, I adjust this to 16. So I sort of have a little bit of an issue here with this thing shrinking when I change font sizes. Now, if I want to save myself from constantly like adjusting this, so if I'm like, I need this thing to be 48 pixels high, now I'm doing a little bit of adjusting here, and then I'm looking at the size as I'm adjusting, that's great, but what if all of a sudden somebody says, hey, we'd like you to be at 15. So now I'm at 15, and then lo and behold, oh my gosh, I'm at 47. Like this thing keeps switching. What we can do is we can actually go into here and change our line height. This is just one approach. There's probably a lot of different ways that you could take care of this. But what if you always wanted that thing to be 16 high so that this is a predictable height? So indeed, you can just type in 16 here, and then let's see what this nav item height is. It's at 48. If I ever then decide, you know what, I want this thing to be like 17, notice that this height doesn't change because we've pinned that height at 16. There, like I said, plenty of other approaches around this, but this is just one quick and dirty way to get at this. All right, so now we've got our navigation items in here, and we can kind of follow up here. We've got following, browse, oh, whatever, we'll do esports, why not? No, we're gonna put Animal Crossing because that's like the esports of Switch. And then if I take this item here and I just merely duplicate, it'll just tack it onto the end and move it over, which is the great thing about auto layout. I love that, super cool. All right, so I'm gonna add music, and heck, maybe I'll have some other like icon, this is an overflow menu here. We can easily create something like that by just creating like an icon-based nav item. Or maybe, in my mind, I have this sickness where I always want to like over-engineer my components. So let's enter my sickness for a second and just see how my mind works. What I might do is actually, okay, this is gonna be a little funky hack, but I always like to share like one super special little unique snowflake of a hack every time I do this kind of stuff. So I'm gonna create, I don't know why and where I even came up with this like idea, but I actually really like it. It's very weird, but I'm gonna go ahead, and I don't know why I'm laughing so much at myself, Azra, like please, maybe I'm losing it. Okay,
Yes,
so
yes, you are.
yes, this is what happens when you're designing, but on your own, you're just like so in love with your solutions. Okay, I'm gonna create a little frame, and it's so little, it's actually 0 by 0. What a glorious little frame. You can't even see the name of it. And I'm gonna call this thing a slot. And this is based, slot is a borrowed term from a front-end development. It's not that funny. But Oscar can just make fun of me all day for it. And I'm gonna create the slot in to be a little component. And as you can see, you can't see it. And I'm just gonna put some text here. The slot is here because like you can't see it. Nobody can find it. And it's horrible, really. I trust me, I'll set this back to 100% because it's just sticking with that last line height. See, I can't find it. Oh, there it is. It's right here. So I created this little 0 by 0 slot, and then I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do one more. I'm gonna set it to auto layout and horizontal, so it automatically shifts and changes size based on like stuff within it. And I'm gonna set everything to 0 again, once again, because like, oh wow, you can't see it. Trust me, Azra, like there is a reason for this. Okay, now this nav item text, I'm actually just gonna pull out of here. And I'm gonna put the slot, I actually copied it, and it's in here somewhere. There it is. I'm gonna copy that master component, and I'm gonna slam it in here. And now you can see that that little baby slot, if we could all give him a name, or her, we're not sure. But if you would give the slot a name, that would be awesome. But there it is, just sitting in the middle there. And we'll go ahead and set it to like a vertical centered position. And now we can go ahead and put anything into this nav item. Now we're gonna go ahead and get some icons. I wanna get that overflow. The slot's name is Peepo. I'm not gonna look at the comments too much, but maybe Azra can feed me back the names. She is my assistant, or at least I thought she was. All right, now we're gonna go and look at icons. Go ahead.
I'm hearing Bert, which I really like.
Okay,
I'm liking.
Really?
I'm seeing Sloth, which I'm really liking. So you've got good options.
And then we have like Peepo. You choose.
I'm liking Little Peanut as well.
Oh, I'm in love with that. Okay.
But I think Bert. I think you go with Bert. It feels good, you know?
Great. Little Bert the Peanut. Perfect. We're really verbosely naming our slots. Okay, I honestly didn't know I was going to be sharing this slot secret with you all, but consider yourself very, very blessed on this. Okay, we're going to go ahead and now get some icons because I don't want to design a ton of icons. So we're going to go ahead and go to the community. I'm going to type in icons and just see what's out there. There's probably a myriad of great options here for you, especially if you need to fast forward your workflow. But I'm going to go ahead and use this one. And the reason that I'm going to use this icon set is because if you notice here at this primer style octagons URL, and I'll go ahead and just slam that in chat. If you have somebody that's a developer that's developing your website, this has been really thought out. It's not just SVGs. It actually has a ton of assets for creating the code, the React code, things like this for your developer that are already thought out. So it's a really great resource, not only from a FIGMA perspective, but also from a like a front-end development perspective. So I'll go ahead and duplicate this file. All right, let's just kind of look at what we've got in here. Got a bunch of icons in here. I'm just going to do the quick and dirty method. I'm going to go ahead and grab these 24 pixel icons here, and I'm just going to copy them. I really hope that they did. Yes, they did. They made them into components. I love that. Let's just see if they have any like ... menus and little notification bells. Sure enough, they have all of those. I'm just going to do the quick and dirty method. Come on in here, and I'm just going to create like an icons page. This could be your components page, whatever. I'm going to put them in there and just make sure that all of those are master components as they are here. They even have a squirrel, which I just think is lovely. Why wouldn't we want a squirrel? All right, let's head on back here. Now, since it's in my file here, if I just go to assets, you'll notice this icons is already here and it's already ready to go. I don't want to spend my time working through this page. So I'll go ahead and kind of drop this down a bit here, go back to my design, and I'll go to the assets panel and just type in, let's hope they called it overflow. They did not indeed. Let's see if they called it ellipses. They did not do that as well. Okay. But we do have the notification bell, and I know I'm going to use that. And I'm going to have to do a little bit of work here just to figure out what they've got under symbols and what they called that one. Now I can just look through here visually. Kebab menu. All right. That's what it is. Okay. I'm actually supposed to be showcasing why and how this actually works. Okay, so I'm going to take this nav item text now, and I'm going to turn this into a component. I'm going to call it nav, and I'm just going to call it item text. Now, what I can do here is I can actually come into Little Bert the Peanut. I can actually swap out this slot here for the item text. Now we're back to the state that we were before. And because it was auto layout, and because the little slot fella, Little Bert the Peanut, is actually a auto layout as well, everything just expands out. This is super cool because I can now, I've got all these nav items. It did overwrite all of what I did, but that's because I changed the underlying structure. But what I can do now is come to this fourth nav item, and in this nav item text, I can actually just change this, this stuff. And I can go to icons, symbols, and remember what we had there. We had that kebab menu. Now this is kind of a more belaboring way of getting at it, but we can definitely do it this way. That is actually supposed to auto layout. And I'm not sure what happened there. I know exactly why. You may have run into this issue. I did before and I just gave up last time. Let's go to this nav item text. The reason that this is honoring this size here and it's stretching it is because this item here isn't auto layout either. It's a fixed size. And so it says, oh, we're going to swap it out of this fixed size slot. So if I just set this to auto layout, of course, I'm going to get rid of this. Now this nav item text should be auto layout. I really hope that I've done this right. You can see that I am now floundering because I do not know why it's not working. This is where we're all supposed to tell me, oh, Rogie, it's aha. Okay. The reason for this is that I used their icons. Now I construct my icons a little bit differently. The way that I construct my icons, I can see that we're going on a little bit of a rabbit trail here. So I apologize for all of what I've done to you. I'm going to go ahead and detach this here. Oh, actually, let's not do that. I want to keep these how they are. I'm going to put this thing into a frame. Another way that I could do this is actually just wrap this in an auto layout thing as well. So I could actually put this into a frame itself and put auto layout on that. And I hope that that would actually fix this. So this new kebab menu would be able to fit in there. So this would be like my, my nav icon like this. The reason that it didn't work, and if it doesn't work now, I'm going to be very, very, very unhappy with myself. Let's go here, and I think it's nav. It's going to be icon. Okay, whew. That was rough. That was very, very, very rough. So the reason that this didn't work is that if you're going to use this slot approach, which I actually really like to bring in all kinds of various things, especially if I'm building modal dialogues or menus that I want to swap out all the stuff inside, and I don't want those things to be a predictable height or anything like that, I'll use this slot method. Now, that was a little bit of a complicated rabbit trail. We're just going to move on. We don't really need to worry too much about that anymore. But it's based off this whole idea that everything's auto layout within this world. All right, so let's go ahead and let's take this text and let's get back to designing this. Now, remember that I created this secondary instance here so that I could see how this responds. And this seems like it's doing just fine because this is set to a left and top alignment. That's great. Now let's go ahead and design out our search bar. Search bar should be pretty easy. We'll go ahead and just grab an icon as well. So we'll grab that search icon, see if Google has predictable, GitHub has predictable icons. Great, we're good there. We've got that search icon. We're gonna go ahead and create a field, some kind of a field component here. We'll keep it really, really simple. We'll go ahead and do everything the same height. A lot of times when you're designing forms, buttons, everything like that, and I would say a nav item is a form of a button. Even the fields themselves you'll want to be, I'm not going to draw it inside of there, I draw it outside of it. I want it to be exactly the same height as this, so we're going to go ahead and make a search field. We'll use some Nintendo colors, so I got a few Nintendo colors here. I'm just going to sample this. Here's a little tip for you that I just learned. If I just sample, this is how I normally would sample, is just hit I and then sample it there. It just samples in one location. But let's go ahead and turn off this grid and let's move this search field into the context here. And let's sample here. And instead of just clicking, I'll actually click and drag. And as I click and drag, I can actually see live in the area where I'm selecting what color it is. So this one looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and give it an 8 pixel border radius. And let's go ahead and get some search text in there. I'm just gonna nab this text out of here. And I'm just gonna throw it in there. And I'm gonna do the same thing. Select both things and hit Shift A to auto lay this thing out. I'm gonna do 16 pixels here for my horizontal. Remember our trick again, we need 16 here. And then we need to just make sure that this is 16. Let's make sure this is checking out. Yep, it's 48, that's perfect. For my search text, I'd like to go ahead and make it a little bit thinner. So I'm gonna go with regular. Now, normally the way that I would set all this stuff up is that this would be connected to like a bold text style, and then this would be connected to some kind of style, and I would create that new style here. We'll skip that today. Figured you all know about styles, so we can learn about that later. Also, I can go ahead and pause for questions if we've got any.
Yeah, we actually have 2 questions. The first question is, when you were choosing your size really early on in the process, somebody asked, like, how do you go about choosing size for desktop, tablet, mobile, considering that there's so many different sizes for each of these devices? Like, how do you even start?
Yeah, I think for me, I go about it just because I've worked in this world for a very long time, but I don't think that's a good answer. I think a good answer would be, you can definitely go out and start looking at some documentations on what sort of sizes are used for like desktop and this and that. There's definitely some good articles out there that I can look up. Don't have them on top of mind. But another good way that you might be able to do this is finding Figma downloaded files, some community files that have full web mockups. And a lot of times they'll have some documentation on that as well. When you're looking at mobile devices, you might look at Apple's HIG, their human interface guidelines, because those are going to be more towards like mobile devices and screens like on an iPhone or something like that, or their apps. And those would be good guidelines on what's readable. The other thing that you want to pay attention to as well, and I would really advise reading like the HIG and things like that, would be that you want to have also things that are tappable. So if you have a button that's 24 pixels by 24 pixels, it's going to be pretty hard to hit with your finger on a screen. So you also want to have a large enough hit target so that people can tap those things. And of course, now that people can look at these websites inside of an iPad or something like that, it may not only be mobile device screens.
Is there a reason why you start?
Go ahead.
Yeah, is there a reason why you start with the desktop layout rather than mobile? Or is that your just habit?
It's a habit from being old as the hills and designing for desktop first. I would say that the most common and probably recommended pattern would be mobile first, and that's as well as front-end development. most front-end developers now adhere to a mobile-first development kind of a stance, just because it's most often the most widely used platform.
Cool. And then I'll ask one more question before
No
you
problem.
keep going. It seems like there's a tiny bit of confusion as to the slot functionality. What does it do, and why do you like using BERT when BERT
Yeah.
is functioning?
Yeah, so I kind of went to like a real, I realized now that maybe that wasn't a good example at all. Let me give you a showcase of something you would do that doesn't need slots at all. Slots are just like a new cool thing that I started using because I found that there were often patterns like a modal dialogue where I would want to fill the space with maybe something entirely new that made it like, for instance, if we were going to draw a dialogue here, and this is our little dialogue box, and I wouldn't want to create it to be a fixed width or a fixed height, but sometimes we want it to like get wider or taller. And I found that sometimes my design systems that I was building were a little too rigid. And I didn't necessarily want, for instance, with this search field here, if we just put this as a slot in there, this can only have a 24 pixel by 24 pixel slot in here, meaning I can only replace it with 24 pixel by 24 pixel content. But what if in a scenario I wanted to actually add something different here? I wanted to have some text here, and then I actually had a text button that I wanted to put in there. So like embed the button in the field. Normally what I would do is I would just create an entirely new construct that's like input with button inside. What I found out with doing this slot technique, and when I'm done with the stream, I'll go ahead and just publish this thing. This isn't a very commonly used technique, but I found that I really loved using it because then I could just bring in all kinds of different size content and swap those things out. And I'll give an example here. We're creating a search field here. And a pretty common pattern, let's just go ahead and create this thing into a component, and let's just call this, we'll call it an input, like a text input. And so typically how I would build these things, let's just drag an instance of this thing here. If this is all auto layout, I can go ahead and I would just put in here like right icon. I would just rename this component to right icon. And then often another pattern for this would be like, hey, maybe you have like a left prepended icon. So I would put here left icon. And so normally what I would do is I would build these little slots into the component, and then this is just a text input. And then if I ever wanted to say, make this into a search field, I just come into this instance, and then I would bring in this right icon, and then I would just swap this out for whatever I wanted. So in that case, I could just swap this instance, and that's what I'm talking about here. Is like I could swap this into, hey, maybe this is like a fire button, and so you wanted them to press that. But I found that this only allows me, this architecture only allows me to bring in 24 by 24 pixel objects. And I think for most cases, it works. Okay, so the one thing that we did do wrong about setting this up is every time I bring in this icon now, I've noticed that this one's 24 pixels tall. And we really sized everything based off of a 16 pixel height. So notice that this input is 48, but this one here is 56. I hate that. So since we know that our icons are going to be 24 in this case, go ahead and set that line height to 24 here. And I'll go ahead and adjust this down so that I can get to my 48 pixel component. All right, this is great. We'll go ahead and put in a search here. All right. And we'll go ahead and gray this text out a little bit. So I'll just drop the opacity down here for like a placeholder text. Normally what I would do, if we weren't going pretty fast at this, is I would create another style here and call this placeholder text. And that way it is ubiquitous across all of my designs. And I could always just choose that. Now, keep in mind also, this isn't really accessible. This is probably going to be hard to read. If I were to use an app like Contrast or a plugin to check out the accessibility, which basically says, how readable is this text when it's against this background? I will almost assure you that that fails. And indeed, actually, that didn't select the right color. There we go. Indeed, I keep struggling with my full screen. That does fail. So we do have to bump this up a little bit more. And using this really cool little menu bar app, I can actually bump it up manually. Let me get out of full screen mode so that I can. All right. If I can show this to you, this doesn't really work well. So in contrast, which is a really great little menu bar app made by Matt D. Smith and Sam Sophis, if I can keep bumping up with shift or down, I can actually get myself into a place where this text is accessible. I can then copy this value out and say, hey, this is going to be my accessible value here. Go ahead and just put that at 100%. Now that can be readable. So we'll go ahead and do that there. All right, so now we've got a search field here. It's auto layout, which is not so great, right? Because I can't actually expand it. We'll go ahead and skip over this though. I can show you later, if we have a little bit more time in the stream, how I might go about making this thing both expandable horizontally and vertically. All right, let's just
Rogie, I'm gonna pause you real quick. What's the name of the accessibility plugin? I think you
so we're
talked
looking
really
for
fast.
contrast.
Got it.
Let me see if there's actually a link in here as well.
Oh, someone just popped it in.
Yeah, right on.
Cool, keep on going.
That's great. There's also a myriad of really, really great contrast plugins on the community as well. Azra, if you want to, actually, I'll just go ahead and do that here because these are built into Figma, which I think are great. And I'll grab one of those out. Okay, I believe this is the one that I really, really love. Let me make sure if this is the right one. Yes, I believe this one actually checks like images behind text. So it's really, really powerful. I'll go ahead and drop this one in as well because this one is legit. All right. There we go. Yeah, this one's super cool. All right, so now let's just see how this whole nav will end up responding. So notice that this isn't really working too well. That's because this middle field here, the search field, I really want it to be centered. So here we'll set up our constraints to set it at center. And notice that's why I have this one a little bit smaller here, is that you can see that this is actually, it actually moves in response to this as well. So that's kind of the behavior that I want there. I want it to stay centered. We'll have to address this later as to how we can adapt this layout later on. All right, and now let's set up this last bit, which is going to be a few icons and then some kind of an avatar. Let's go ahead and fast track by just creating a little ellipse for our avatar. Let's use our magic number, 48 by 48. We'll go ahead and just create that into a component. We'll call it avatar. And I'll go ahead and alt drag off an avatar component here. And what else will we need there? Well, we're going to want that notification bell. So we'll just grab that notification bell and we will just drag that over here next to this one. Now let's take these two and put them into an auto layout frame. So I'm going to hit Shift A. And I want to see the spacing in between these. Let's go to 16 as the spacing in between these. And then let's set this to right. Now, if I go all the way to the edge, and I actually have my nudge amount set to 8, and I just hit twice, that should be 16 off the edge. If I hold Alt while I'm actually selected on this object, you can see I can measure spaces here and the distance. Remember, I can always just turn on my layout grid again too and see where that's at, and it's right on that 16 mark, which is great. Now let's just set this up. This is going to be right. Let's set it to center. Why not? If all of a sudden we decided we wanted to tweak this thing and we wanted to go 88 pixels high or something like that, we would want everything to stay centered. So let's just make sure that we've got everything set up to center on the vertical as well here. This navigation group, center as well. All right, we can go ahead, we'll address switchy later over there, but let's just test if we did change that height. We are noticing that everything here is centering as well, which is super cool. Now, if we want this one to also respond, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this notion of an auto layout frame for it. And I can just hit subtract on that. And what I can set up on this frame now is I can actually say it's on the left, but I want to pin it to the top and the bottom. And then within this, I have a frame, and then I have another frame inside. So I can actually do some pretty cool things in here. In this one, I can say left, and I can say center. So now I'm actually constraining within a constraint, which I really love. You can do that within all frames, but you can see here that notice that this guy is not actually like stretching or skewing. It's just centering right within there, but this outer frame is actually stretching with the nav. So that allows me to do adjustments as I need to as I move along. I did see a question from Ian. Why aren't left, right, top, and bottom available as a constraint option for auto layout containers? It really depends on the auto layout type that you're doing, Ian. For instance, this one here, if we did set it up as auto layout, this is a horizontal one. And so you can see here that I can do left, right, top, and bottom here. But as soon as I switch that to vertical, if I chose to, I cannot do that because what we're telling it with auto layout is like, hey, the size of you, you're determined by your contents. So I can absolutely do this so long as I have it on a auto layout horizontal frame. And you can see here that it should work. Well, let's get here. Left, right, top, and bottom. Let's see, what do we do here? We'll go to fixed height here. All right, there we go. And that may be some of the trickery around auto layout is if you have this horizontal, but you have this option set to auto height, then you'll have a problem. But as long as you switch right on over to fixed height, then it should be able to adjust that for you. All right. All right, we only have a little bit more time. So let's see how our nav is adjusting. So right now everything is anchored to the right size here. If for some reason we had a couple of icons in here, this should be set up on an auto layout frame. And since it's pinned to the right, if I duplicate this one, and let's just give it another icon here, just something different. Yeah, let's say it's graph. You can actually center it here with this option. If for whatever reason, like this icon wasn't present in a different navigation or on a different mockup, you could always just come in here and hit delete and you would delete it out. And because that's auto layout and it's set to pin right, it'll adjust that way as well, which is super cool. Azra, since we're getting to the end, I really want to make sure that I'm getting to all questions. So I'm going to trust you and rely on you on this.
Yeah, cool. Well, let me ask some questions that just came in. Friends wants to know, how do you manage to have excellent spacing with your text in a button?
I don't even know how to answer that question. Excellent spacing with your text in a button. I think we did go over this a little bit. I think one of the key things is just making sure that if you want to go ahead and use auto layout on this stuff, like for instance, if we never wanted to allow things to expand here, notice we kept going to this line height thing. What we could do instead is just allow this thing to be automatic. And I don't even know if we can do this, but yeah, we can. You can type in auto and notice it went to 19. But notice this changed the wrong size. We could just create a fixed height here if we wanted to. If we always wanted this to stay this way at 48, then we could absolutely do that way. But I would say that with everything, with design, I try to keep everything on an 8-pixel grid. But other than that, a lot of times I will just do some eyeballing here. But I do want to see that there's like a consistent spacing on the top and then the left. On buttons, however, I will actually add a little bit more horizontal padding just to create more of a larger hit region there. And I'm not sure if that answered the question at all, but thank you for the question about excellent spacing.
One question from Dinesh is, how can we design, for an example, an auto layout button with a fixed icon on the left and a variable button, but ultimately have the same overall length?
Okay, so that was a lot. So it's say that again. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, the question is, how can we design an auto layout button with a fixed icon on the left and a variable text, but ultimately have the same overall length? Maybe as part of a
Okay.
vertical array of buttons.
Yeah, we could do that this way. Let's see here. One way to approach this, and I think I'll just go ahead and demonstrate it here with this search field. Let's find where I put that file. I think I actually just probably deleted it for some reason. Let's see. Where did I put my little search field? All right, well, we'll find it. Go to the master component. Do we end up using the nav item for the search field? Who knows? Oh, yep, we did. Awesome. Okay. So effectively what we want to be able to do here, and this happens a lot. So say in mobile design, you've got a button and you really want that button to, maybe in some instances, you want that button to be able to change sizes to the text. But in other instances, maybe it's a submit button at the bottom of a iOS device or something. You kind of want to go full screen, right? Or you want to go full width. So the way you would approach that is creating another auto layout container around this thing. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm actually going to take this here and I'm going to take these two objects in here and I'm going to set them to auto layout here and I'm going to set them to a horizontal auto layout. And what I'd like to do is really have all the properties of this auto layout, the 16, 12, 10 and all that. So I'm going to do that. I can either copy them or I can just type them in here. And remember that trick, I can actually just pull this to be 48 high. And what I'm going to do here is just rip out all this because I'm nesting my auto layouts. Now, here's the trick. This one's going to be vertical auto layout. And notice I still have my fill on this here. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see what we got here. We have the icon in here. We have a frame, and that frame, let's bring that right icon in here as well. And let's make sure that this is a horizontal. Okay, great. We just had to make sure they were all in this horizontal frame. Let's turn on all of our icons so we can kind of really see what's going on here. As well as I'm going to go ahead and change my background to white so that we can start seeing the bounds of this shape. Now, here's the cool thing is that now, because this input component is vertical, I can actually have auto width or I can do a fixed width. So I can stretch this way. I can also take this inner horizontal auto layout item and actually shove it up here on the left side. And now I can go ahead and have this here. And so I can still have an icon on the left and I can still have my text and my text can go ahead and move and change size here. And then I can, of course, if I'd like to, I can take this right appended icon and I can move that out here. And I can actually, I'll have to do a little bit more work to be able to bring this and pin this to the right. I can absolutely do that. The other approach to this could also be, instead of a vertical auto layout container, I can just create a frame and then I can just drag this right appended icon out here and set this to a right and center. And then I can go ahead and do this like this. And then of course, since this component or this portion of the input is auto layout and horizontal, if I remove this icon, the text will move over. And I think that's hopefully what you were trying to achieve.
Cool. I have one more question from my dear friend, anonymous attendee. And the question is, can the search field have a transition? So change from the size of the entry box, icon color, etc., as you create the component, so that can be used across your website and maintain the transition animation.
So right now we don't have states, and I think that is maybe what you're getting at. So what we can do if we'd like to create different states, we're not going to necessarily have an animation that happens every time when you hover it. But what you can do is take this component here, take an instance of it. Let's zoom in just a little bit. And then we can create a wrapper component around it. And we would call this maybe input slash, and maybe this is like a focused state, like when your cursor goes in it. And let's say the focus state, maybe the background goes to white. And then you've got like this border that is like a purple color. Oop, or actually not on the border. All right. So maybe you've got like a 2-pixel red Nintendo colored border around that. And maybe that's like your focus state. So now you've got these two components. And so say you're in a mockup, and let's just go ahead and grab a frame and let's put that on the screen. And let's say you've got this instance of the nav inside of this mockup. Go ahead and give this like a dark UI so we can start kind of see where this is at. All right, and we've stretched this left and right, perfect. But in this one, you want to showcase some UX. You want to show like, this is what's happening when the user is doing this, this, or that. And so what you'll do is you'll come in here and swap this out, and you can swap that out into an input focused. And now you can actually showcase that. Now, if you'd also like to create some notes for your developers on this as well, you can use Smart Animate, prototypes, and things like that to be able to go over into like your design system. And maybe you've got some a page over here where you've put all your inputs and the way that they work when you hover them or this or that. And that way you can actually start showcasing, okay, when you hover it, this happens and it fades in or it slides in. And you can do that, all of that with Figma, Smart Animate, and prototypes. I would absolutely advise maybe checking out our last stream for that one. And you can start learning a little bit more about that. I won't go too much into depth on that.
Well, I'm going to ask one final question. Can you fix the nav item to be vertically centered? It seems off in favor of the bottom edge. Curious how you would do that.
Yeah, so which nav item are we talking about specifically? Just this one here?
I think
Probably,
so, yeah.
Probably this one, the one that says nav item. You can actually, if it seems a little bit off, maybe the optical align, you need more optical alignment there. We have a couple of different text attributes here that can go into this nav item text, and I can say center this text here. The other thing that you could do is potentially manually resize the box here and then center it within this as well. So right now we have a 16 pixel height. I know that personally I've really struggled with this a lot. Sometimes you'll have a font, for whatever reason, it kind of hangs a little bit higher. So I would definitely explore the alignment options that you see here. Right now you can't really see much just because it is, let's do this. But these different alignment items will center it within the box or align to the top of the box. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of a finicky font that has an interesting baseline. And so you may want to tweak with some of those things. But then always remember that when you're over here within your components, just make sure that vertically centered is on here as well.
Cool. I think that's all the time that we have for questions. Rogie, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming in. I'll go ahead and polish this up and just push this little example out to the community. So thanks so much. Let's go ahead and just kind of close up to let y'all know that this will be published at figma.com, or I'm sorry, it'll be published at youtube.com/Figma Design within a handful of days. But any future live streams are going to be at figma.com/events. And if you have any suggestions for our stream or have any other questions or need any help, let me know at that email.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you again.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.